Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of a Junior VC Behind the Scenes. This week, I'm joined by Keshav, Abhinay, and Rajiv, and we're going to talk about this week's episode is 10-minute delivery, a solution looking for a problem. So, Keshav, can you get us started by telling our listeners why we chose this topic for this week?
Sure, Mazen. So I think quick commerce as a space itself is pretty new in India, right? So it started around 2020 onwards and came into prominence with the entrance of Zepto in the market. So we were actively tracking the space quite a lot in the last few quarters. And now we felt it was the right time to write about it because there were a few activities which had happened in the space. So Swiggy sort of recently planned that they would sort of shut down their SuprDaily stores, all of that, but they were also planning to invest big amount of money in Instamart. At the same time, Zepto had raised a big round, and then there was some consolidation happening wherein Blinkit was in merger talks with Zomato, right? So while all of this activity was happening, at the same time, globally, we also wanted to sort of see the evolution, how it had happened. And it was very interesting to see the journey, right? That it was a typical pendulum swing that it had started with a boom in the early 1999 era, and then it had crashed, and then it evolved again, and then again now it is sort of in the liquidity crunch space, right? So we just wanted to cover the evolution, and again, it's a very interesting story. So I'll allow others also to chip in now.
Thanks for that, Keshav. And with that, Rajiv, can you tell us about how the sector started with, I believe, the tech bubble crash in the 2000s?
Yeah, I think during the dot-com years, what happened was, the internet started becoming a solution for almost everything, right? So any company with a dot-com suffix found funding and enough money to hit the ground running, test out its operations. And at that time, grocery delivery was no different, right? So Webvan started it in the US. They raised money very early, had a lot of funds to, bring this new service to the market. Traditionally in the US, people went to grocery stores, went to chains to buy groceries and, their daily needs. But with this, they could have it delivered to their home. So it was like a desktop to doorstep model of sorts, right? But however, what Webvan did was it assumed people were ready for such a service. It assumed that if they offered the service, people would definitely run to use it, to try it out, to buy it, and they would gain a lot of traction. So they set out to expand to as many US cities as possible. Went to 26 cities, set up like big, complicated, state-of-the-art warehouses, which cost them like 30 million a piece, and they set out to build that entire product for the masses. As with every other dot-com company, they IPO'd really fast within 3 months of operation. But as fate would have it for them, they burned through all the money that they had raised in about 19 months, right? And they didn't live to see whether customers actually would opt for such a service or would want to pay for it. Their initial traction was with a very small set of customers given the population of the US, and they were still not charging enough of a premium to test the market or to see whether customers really wanted this product, right? And similarly, there was Cosmo at around the same time in the US, and Cosmo in fact went a step ahead to promise the 30-minute delivery. So they allowed customers to order things ranging from everyday needs like food, and also things like DVDs, movies, and a lot of electronic items as well, right? But again, the fate was similar until and the important thing about Cosmo is that they offered the $0 delivery fee as well, no delivery fee. So anyone who dared to use the service could take advantage of it and gain from it. So again, they weren't really testing whether customers were ready for it, ready to pay a premium for such convenience, right? And very quickly, both of these died down. And the only one that kind of stood the test of grocery delivery was Amazon, who didn't promise you deliveries in 30 minutes or 1 hour, but it was more of 1 to 5 days, right? So Amazon was like this dark horse that was building delivery, were actually changing customer behavior from going to a store and buying what you need to sitting at home and getting things delivered. So I think most of 2000 until 2010 was there was a shift in customer behavior, which was very gradual. The likes of Target, Walmart also started offering online shopping, but it was more of a multi-channel model. There was this gradual turn from going to a store to then ordering online, right? And of course, companies across the world like Flipkart started moving to this online shopping, but not yet quick commerce, right? It was only after the 2010s where, where the dot-com companies started coming back in the delivery space. And what they decided was, how do we get a competitive edge now? Amazon was this big e-commerce giant. There were big box retailers in the US. So where do you find a competitive edge? And that's where companies like GoPuff started fast delivery. They said you can get anything you want. Again, the promise of 30 minutes. But now you'll have to pay for it, right? You'll have to order a minimum of $49, or you end up paying a delivery fee for it. But the difference between the Webvan and the Cosmo model and GoPuff was in the measured approach, right? So GoPuff was founded by, were founded by a couple of people who actually felt the need for it, and they targeted the college audience, right? Who wanted things, chips and ice creams and snacks very late at night. So they started with a very small community approach, like what a lot of startups do today, akin to an MVP, like you might call it. It wasn't very popular then, but that's what you could, call it in today's parlance. And then they built from there. They didn't raise money. They weren't, the first to raise a lot of millions. They took a couple of years to build this model, test it out. And it was during this time that, the concept of dark stores, or, these micro fulfillment centers came up in a lot of neighborhoods in the US. A less talked about advantage that GoPuff also had was, they started building in Philadelphia, away from, the Bay Area and the very tech-friendly locations, right? So they weren't under too much pressure to raise money. But finally they did. When they started getting traction, they obviously invited a lot of VC interest, and they started started raising money, building larger, more scalable operations. And I think that's when, around 2015-16, the sector started getting traction in India too. I think the Indians learned that this is something that customers do want now. And customers have, there's also this mobile phone a revolution that's come up across the world. People are more comfortable using their phones, and there was this arm's length concept of ordering, right? So if you could reach out to your phone, you could reach out to an order. And that's where I think the journey of quick commerce really starts, or takes off in the 2015-16s. So yeah, I can pass it over to maybe Abhinav to explain that phase to us.
Yeah, so I think 2014-15, that's the time which is very different for for Indian startup ecosystem. It's very similar to 2021 if you think of it, right? There are many startups coming up, somewhere all the startups were in different space, but there are some space, the space like hyperlocal delivery. This space was really hot. There are solutions for for food delivery, for grocery delivery. Multiple solutions were being built, and in a way, that was a time it became too hot and it was very competitive. But at the same time, because of the trends that Rajiv just spoke about, something that has happened, investors have seen that globally such solutions are going to be built. Now people are going to order through their mobile phones. The only challenge was India was still very new, right? Indian consumer was not ready yet. They were just ordering on Flipkart. They were just ordering through cash on delivery. They did not have the right trust. Okay. Also, Jio was going to come up with their cheap data plans in next 2-3 years. So there was not so much of adoption yet. So when you are going to build a solution like grocery delivery, which which was started, Grofers was there, Big Basket was there was Pepper Tap, Local Bunny, all these players were there, right? They got good valuation because global trend was in their favor, but at the same time adoption was very difficult. So in that case, what happened was the adoption was not there. So the way they can grow was through discounts. And convenience was not something that was the only reason why customers were ordering, right? Over time, what happened was after 2015, there was a winter again, like 2022. There's not no easy money available, and people have to cut costs. They have to go for layoffs. The local banya shut down, right? So all those things happened. But what happened was, like in food tech, there was Tiny Owl, so many players were there. But Swiggy, Zomato, what they did was they focused completely on building really good products which are habit forming. They ensure that customer experience is the core reason, not the discount, right? That for which they were building. So over time, these habits got built, and from 6 or 7 players in food tech, we got to a point where now Swiggy and Zomato effectively have a duopoly in food tech space, right? So this has happened in food tech space. And this is also a space which is very similar to grocery delivery in a way that you have to deliver from point A to point B. Also, the average order value is not very high. So taking inspiration from there, right? By this time, Grover was trying multiple business models. Big Basket had its own way of working. But this change was coming, and there were some models to learn from. At the same time, globally, again, as Rajiv mentioned, GoPuff has started somewhere around 2013. Then there was Get It, which was getting started in Turkey. Then there was something in UK. There was something in Germany. Everywhere we could see some models emerging, right? So in India also, what happened was around 2020, when COVID has hit, lockdown was there. And also because Jio has already penetrated the market, there were Vivo, Oppo, all type of smartphones. So almost we had more than 300 million smartphone users by then, right? So what happened when the lockdown happened? There was huge adoption that came. People first search, right? Because they cannot step out of their house. If I want, I want something, right? I need to search, right? So the first way to search was not going outside your house, but it was searching on the mobile phone. In fact, Big Basket did not have enough slots, right? Because it was full. There's so much of demand pressure. What happened from there is the companies could build on this trend, this fast adoption that was coming for online grocery. And by 2020, there were new solutions, right? People could see new use cases, right? One of the use cases being that if it is being delivered in 10 minutes, it is as good as you just punch an order and do a small work, and food will get delivered. It was making you think from the monthly planned purchases to move towards unplanned purchases, right? And these behavioral changes at consumer level, it got eye of all investors. They started pumping in again money around 2020-21. That's where many players again came up in this place. Ola has been around. They also started Ola Dash. Grofers moved towards Blinkit, and so on, right? So the main thing that happened around this time is quick commerce got a chance. They have already seen that if food tech can probably focus and build something, they also got an opportunity to learn from them. At the same time, the tailwinds were in its favor to restart around 2020, and that's what they started building upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And just continuing to what Abhinay mentioned, right? I think quick commerce sort of had that perfect timing, right? Because you had that pandemic boost, which sort of increased the consumer's readiness to sort of order online. And the single planned purchases, which you typically had with your Kirana stores, all of that per month, that started unbundling into multiple unplanned purchases, right? So there was convenience aspect, which was very clear, right? So if we see when Zepto had initially started, there were tweets from consumers that my order is delivered in 6-7 minutes, it's lightning fast, all of that, right? So that kind of product market fit was being hit. But again, as Abhinay mentioned, right, could they build a sustainable sort of unit economics model? Could they move towards path of profitability, right? That was the key question which these companies had to address. And parallel to that, I think 2021 was a contrast. 2022 is a complete contrast in terms of funding. We are already hearing of liquidity crunch. All of that is happening. The US is inflation is at an all-time high. There is the UK, the Ukraine, Russia war, which is happening, all of that. And there is increase in interest rates, all of that, which is happening, because of which there is a liquidity crunch in the market. Late stage investing is sort of tapering off, right? Which eventually affected the quick commerce sector also, because it is a cash guzzling space. You need a lot of investments which have to be done for dark store expansion, to build your delivery fleet, to optimize on the logistics, as well as any cashbacks and all which have to be given to incentivize consumers, right? But the tailwinds were still there. So as per a report, quick commerce was at around 300 million in market size in India in 2021, but it was expected to grow 10 to 15x by 2025, right? And its share was expected to grow from 7% of the overall sort of grocery market to 12 to 13% in the same time period, right? There are these new players which have come up, like Zepto, which has promised a 10 to 15-minute delivery. There is Blinkit, which has already rebranded. And there are various sort of things which other players are also attempting, right? Dunzo and all, right? But within that itself, I mean, if you look at the consumer adoption also, right? That is also in favorable trend for them. So again, there was a survey which revealed that 70% of users in metro tier 1 cities, they prefer unplanned smaller purchases as opposed to planning large monthly purchases now. So that consumer behavioral shift, which had happened in the food tech space, because of which they had started to pay for delivery fees, search fees, all of that, that was trickling in the quick commerce space itself. And now in the last couple of months, if we see, these quick commerce startups have started charging delivery fees. So in Zepto also, if you order, I think 4 or 5 orders, there's a delivery fee. Blinkit has started a search fee, all of that, right? Because they're experimenting whether consumers are willing to pay. And it will be interesting to see now how their unit economics as well as cohorts evolve at an order level, both at a transaction as well as at an AOV level. So all of that will be interesting. And at the same time, they still have aggressive expansion plans. So Zepto has acquired around 100 dark stores in 2022. Swiggy has also sort of onboarded one seller and dark store almost every day over the past few months. So all of them are scaling up well, but at the same time, they understand that the unit economics has to work in favor for them, right? And there have been casualties in the space also globally. So in March 2022, 2 quick commerce players in US, Fridge No More and Bike, shut down, while DoorDash, which is the most prominent startup, they pulled their plug in quick commerce, right? So all of that is impacting the India space itself. There will be a liquidity crunch, which these players also understand. And that is why there is a more focus towards sort of building for better margins, right? So can they probably diversify their AOV to have fresh fruits and vegetables, which have a higher gross margin of 30 to 40%, rather than just operating on the traditional sort of FMCG items, which have a gross profit of 10 to 12%, right? Can they sort of diversify into other spaces? So for example, Zepto is thinking of going into medicine delivery. Does it have higher margins? All of that has to be thought about. They are thinking of expanding into cafe delivery, all of that. So all of those things will have to be thought of as the next phase of quick commerce evolves in India. Ultimately, I think what we feel is that after sort of researching the space, and what we as a team felt was that this could be a feature rather than a prominent play on its own, right? So quick commerce could serve as a wedge wherein you could enter into the market, into the grocery delivery market itself, and try to build something big by hooking consumers onto that aspect, right? That is the same thing which we are observing with Swiggy, which has a separate vertical now called Instamart, or Zepto, which is now planning to enter other sorts of e-commerce space, right? So overall, we think that quick commerce is probably a solution, but it is only part of the piece which is solving a very large problem in the grocery delivery space. And it will be very interesting to see that whether the pendulum evolves back to the 2000s era, where we had these startups which raised tons of money, but ultimately perished. We are more on the optimistic side this time because of the consumer behavioral change which is happening, because of consumer acceptance to pay for deliveries, all of that. And next sort of 18 to 24 months will really define how quick commerce shapes up in India.
Thanks a lot, Keshav, Rajiv. I really enjoyed learning a bit more about quick commerce, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you again next week.